Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're talking about on most leaders don't even know the game they're in. Leadership is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the modern world. Too often, people equate leadership with the title CEO, manager, director, founder. These labels carry an air of power, of prestige, and for many they become the goal. But leadership has never been about the label. It's not about where your name sits on the org chart or how many people report to you. Leadership is not a role, it's a responsibility. The moment we reduce leadership to a position, we strip it of its true essence. We turn it into a reward for performance, a badge of honor, or worse, a throne to be guarded. But real leadership doesn't come with a crown. It comes with a burden to care, to listen, to serve, and to elevate others above yourself. True leaders understand that the higher you rise, the more responsibility you carry. You're no longer responsible just for your own success. You're responsible for the people around you, their development, their growth, their well-being. It's no longer about how well you perform, it's about how well your team performs because of your influence. And that's the shift that most so-called leaders never make. Too many people chase leadership because they want to be seen, not because they want to serve. They want the stage, not the sacrifice. They want the perks of the position, not the pain of accountability. But leadership is not glamorous. It's not always exciting. It's often uncomfortable. It demands that you show up when it's inconvenient. It demands that you make hard decisions, not for your benefit, but for the benefit of those you lead. When leadership is treated as a role, it becomes about control. Leaders begin to hoard power, hoard information, and hoard recognition. They forget that their real job is to unlock potential, not to be the smartest in the room, but to make space for others to shine. The responsibility of leadership is to create more leaders, not more followers. It's to build a system where your absence doesn't break the process because you've built something resilient, self-sustaining, and mission-driven. There is a fundamental difference between being in charge and being a leader. Anyone can be in charge. All it takes is an appointment letter or a promotion. But being a leader means being trusted. It means being followed not because people have to, but because they want to. And that trust is earned through service, through consistency, through humility. Think about the best leaders you've ever had in your life, not the most successful, but the most impactful. Chances are they weren't the ones barking orders or seeking credit. They were the ones who made you feel seen. The ones who made you believe in yourself a little more. The ones who challenged you, stretched you, and never gave up on you, even when you wanted to give up on yourself. That's leadership, that's responsibility in action. In many organizations, people are promoted into leadership roles based on competence, not character. We reward technical skill without measuring emotional intelligence. We assume that because someone is good at doing, they'll be great at leading. But doing and leading are entirely different games. A great performer might be excellent at solving problems, but a great leader is excellent at developing people who can solve problems on their own. Responsibility in leadership also means owning your failures, not pointing fingers, not blaming external forces, but standing in the fire and saying, "This is mine." It means apologizing when necessary, being transparent when it's uncomfortable, and choosing courage over comfort every single time. You can't call yourself a leader and then disappear when the pressure hits. Leadership means stepping forward, especially when it's difficult. And most importantly, leadership is about vision, not the kind you scribble on a whiteboard, but the kind that lives in your daily actions. Your people don't follow what you say, they follow what you do. They're always watching, always listening, always measuring the distance between your words and your behavior. If your leadership is performative, if it's driven by ego, optics, or fear, they'll feel it. But if it's driven by responsibility, by integrity, by genuine care, they'll follow you through fire. The biggest mistake many leaders make is approaching their work as if it's a game that can be won. They create strategies to beat the competition. They obsess over market share, profit margins, quarterly goals, and staying ahead of the next company down the road. To them, business is a race with a finish line, and they believe their job is to cross that line before anyone else. This mindset is called finite thinking, where the objective is to win, and the end is clearly defined. But leadership doesn't work like that. Business doesn't either. In reality, they are both infinite games. In a finite game like basketball or chess, the players are known, the rules are fixed, and the outcome is clear. There's a winner and a loser. But in the world of leadership and business, the players can change at any time. The rules evolve constantly, and there is no finish line. There is no final buzzer that declares one company the ultimate victor. The game goes on with or without you. The organizations and leaders who thrive over decades are the ones who realize this. They adopt an infinite mindset. An infinite mindset isn't about winning, it's about enduring. It's about building something that lasts long after you've left the room. Leaders with an infinite mindset understand that their responsibility is not to defeat the competitor today, but to become stronger, more resilient, and more meaningful for years to come. They are not chasing applause, they are building legacy. Finite thinking creates short-term behavior. When you play to win a quarter, you make decisions that spike results temporarily, often at the expense of long-term trust, innovation, and team morale. You cut corners, you push people too hard, you focus on optics instead of impact. But when you play the infinite game, the question shifts. You begin asking, how do? We build something that people want to be a part of 5 years from now. It forces you to prioritize sustainability over spectacle. This difference in mindset influences every aspect of leadership. In finite thinking, change is threatening. New players, new technologies, or new trends are seen as risks to your position. But in the infinite game, change is not a threat, it's fuel. Infinite leaders embrace change because they are not trying to protect a title or maintain an illusion of control. They are trying to grow, adapt, and keep playing. The goal isn't to hold ground, the goal is to keep moving. One of the defining traits of infinite-minded leaders is their willingness to invest in people and processes that do not yield immediate returns. They understand that not everything that counts can be measured on a spreadsheet. Trust, culture, innovation, resilience, these are the real drivers of success in the long game. They might not create a sudden spike in numbers, but they create the foundation for exponential growth over time. And that's what the infinite game demands. Finite thinkers fear vulnerability because it might make them look weak. Infinite-minded leaders embrace vulnerability because it makes them human. When you're playing to win, mistakes are dangerous. They're viewed as setbacks. But when you're playing to keep going, mistakes are necessary. They're opportunities to learn, to adapt, and to evolve. Infinite leaders don't hide from their flaws, they learn from them. They don't chase perfection, they pursue progress. The infinite game is also deeply tied to purpose. Finite thinking often centers around metrics, profit, productivity, and performance. But infinite thinking asks a deeper question. Why are we doing this? It's not just about making something better, it's about making something matter. Infinite-minded leaders are driven by vision. They have a cause or mission that extends beyond revenue. This mission becomes their compass, their guide through uncertainty and disruption. It's what aligns the team and fuels them when the numbers aren't enough to inspire. The paradox is that when you stop obsessing over winning, you actually become better, more trusted, more innovative, and more attractive to talent partners and customers alike. Because people want to be part of something bigger than a race. They want to be part of something enduring. The infinite mindset doesn't ignore competition, but it refuses to be controlled by it. It recognizes that in an infinite game, the only true competitor is yourself, your past self, your outdated habits, your previous limitations. The game isn't to beat others, it's to outgrow who you were yesterday. One of the most dangerous assumptions in leadership is the belief that people are just resources, interchangeable parts in a machine, existing only to execute tasks, meet quotas, and deliver results. In many organizations, this belief isn't spoken aloud, but it's built into culture. It shows up in how employees are talked about in meetings, how performance is measured, and how decisions are made at the top. People are reduced to KPIs, productivity metrics, and line items on a budget, but real leadership sees people not as a means to an end, but as the entire reason the organization exists. When leaders treat people as tools, they create environments where fear replaces trust, silence replaces creativity, and compliance replaces engagement. Employees become disengaged not because they lack ability or motivation, but because they feel unseen, unheard, and undervalued. The human side of work disappears under the weight of deadlines and deliverables. This kind of environment may produce short bursts of productivity, but it kills long-term innovation, loyalty, and growth. People are not machines. They are not assets to be optimized or liabilities to be managed. They are complex, emotional, intelligent, and full of potential that cannot be captured by a spreadsheet. When you treat them like cogs in a system, they eventually break or leave, but when you invest in them as whole human beings, they don't just stay, they thrive. They bring their ideas, their energy, and their commitment, not because they have to, but because they want to. Leadership is about unlocking that desire. It's about creating an environment where people feel safe, where they know they matter beyond their output. When people feel valued, they contribute more, not because they're trying to avoid punishment or chase rewards, but because they believe in what they're a part of. They become invested in the mission, not just the paycheck. Many leaders get caught in the trap of efficiency over empathy. They focus so much on optimizing systems that they forget they're leading people, not processes. But systems don't innovate, people do. Processes don't build culture, people do. If the people doing the work don't feel empowered, inspired, or supported, no amount of strategy will save the organization from decline. The heartbeat of any great company is its people, and leaders must act like that's true. It's not enough to have a people strategy. The way you treat people is your strategy. Every decision a leader makes, whether it's how meetings are run, how feedback is given, or how promotions are handled, tells a story about what is truly valued. If people are only celebrated when numbers look good, then they learn that results matter more than integrity. If failure is punished, they learn to hide problems instead of solve them. But if empathy, growth, and collaboration are modeled and rewarded, people begin to lead with those same values. Leaders who understand this shift from control to care begin to see extraordinary things happen. When you show people that you care more about who they are than what they do, they begin to do more than you ever thought possible. They become more creative, more committed, and more courageous. And that courage translates into better work, stronger teams, and greater impact. Caring about people doesn't mean lowering expectations. In fact, the opposite is true. When people feel genuinely cared for, they are more likely to rise to the occasion. They take ownership not out of fear, but out of pride. They go the extra mile not because they're afraid of consequences, but because they're inspired by the cause. They bring their full selves to work, and that authenticity fuels collective excellence. Leaders who see people as ends in themselves are the ones who build enduring cultures. They're the ones who attract top talent, not because they offer the highest salaries, but because they create environments where people feel like they matter, where people feel like they belong, and where people know that their work is more than a task, it's a contribution to something meaningful. In the world of leadership, strategy often gets the spotlight. It's glamorous, it's structured, it's measurable. Leaders spend weeks building roadmaps, crafting mission statements, analyzing competitors, and forecasting growth. But behind every spreadsheet, behind every goal-setting session, there lies a deeper force, one that is less visible, harder to quantify, and yet infinitely more powerful. That force is culture. And the truth many leaders fail to recognize is that culture isn't a side dish to strategy, it's the table on which strategy sits. Culture is not the words painted on a company wall. It's not the values framed in the lobby or the slogans in onboarding documents. Culture is the way people behave when no one is watching. It's how people treat each other when pressure mounts. It's the stories they tell, the assumptions they make, the energy they bring to the room. Culture lives in the daily actions, the unspoken rules, the tone of every meeting, and the space between what leaders say and what they do. A brilliant strategy can be rendered useless if it's planted in toxic soil. You can have a vision that's innovative, scalable, and well-researched, but if your people are burned out, scared, or disillusioned, that vision will never take root. Culture is what gives strategy life or kills it silently. It's the operating system that drives every human interaction in an organization. If the system is broken, nothing else runs as it should. Many leaders make the mistake of believing that culture is something that can be managed from a distance or delegated to HR. But culture is not an initiative. It is not a one-off workshop or a rebranding campaign. Culture is the outcome of every decision a leader makes. When you reward certain behaviors and ignore others, you're shaping culture. When you promote someone who undermines the team but hits the numbers, you're shaping culture. When you turn a blind eye to dysfunction because the results look good on paper, you're shaping culture. People will always take their cues from the top. They will watch how leaders act, not just what they say. If there's a gap between the two, culture begins to erode. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens in small, almost invisible moments when someone speaks up and is ignored, when someone makes a mistake and gets publicly shamed, when someone needs help and is told to figure it out alone. Over time, these moments form a culture of fear, silence, and self-preservation. In that kind of environment, no strategy will ever reach its full potential. On the other hand, when a leader prioritizes culture not in words but in action, everything begins to change. People feel safe enough to speak their minds, to challenge ideas, to admit when they're struggling. That safety breeds trust, and trust is the foundation of every high-performing team. When trust exists, people collaborate instead of compete. They lift each other instead of tearing each other down. They work not just for the company's success, but for each other's growth. Leaders who understand the power of culture know that their real job is not just to set direction, but to create an environment where people can do their best work. That environment is not built through command and control, but through clarity and consistency, through listening deeply, communicating transparently, and modeling the values they preach. A healthy culture doesn't eliminate problems, but it gives people the confidence to confront them head on. It's easy to get lost in metrics and milestones, but culture is the heartbeat that makes those numbers possible. A great culture doesn't happen by accident. It is designed, nurtured, and protected. It requires ongoing attention, honest conversations, and a willingness to course correct when things go off track. Culture isn't soft, it's strategic, and when it's strong, it becomes your strategic. Leadership at its core is not built on authority, title, or even competence. It is built on trust. Without trust, leadership is hollow. It may function for a while under fear, control, or incentive systems, but eventually it breaks. People may follow instructions, but they won't follow the leader, not truly. The truth is, people don't give their best to leaders they fear. They give their best to leaders they trust. Trust isn't something you can demand. It's not granted by position or tenure. It must be earned slowly, consistently, and deliberately. It is built over time through every interaction, every decision, and every moment of vulnerability. A leader earns trust by showing they care. More about people than power, more about integrity than appearances, and more about doing what's right than doing what's easy. The challenge with trust is that it is fragile. It can take months or years to build and seconds to destroy. And yet, in many organizations, leaders treat trust like a given. They assume people will follow simply because of hierarchy. They assume loyalty will come through contracts and compensation. But people are not loyal to jobs, they're loyal to people. If they don't trust their leaders, they may stay for a paycheck, but they will never give their passion, their creativity, or their full commitment. Trust begins with transparency. When leaders are open about challenges, honest about mistakes, and clear about intentions, they signal to their team that they have nothing to hide. It doesn't mean oversharing or creating confusion. It means operating with integrity. When a leader tells the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, they prove they are reliable. When they admit what they don't know, they prove they are human. These moments of humility do more to build trust than any motivational speech or policy ever could. Leaders often believe they must have all the answers, but the truth is people don't need their leaders to be perfect. They need them to be real. Authenticity builds trust because it breaks down the walls between us and them. When people see that their leader struggles, questions, and learns just like they do, it creates connection. And connection is the foundation of trust. Another essential element of trust is consistency. Leaders must show up in the same way over time, especially when things get tough. Trust doesn't come from how a leader behaves. On a good day, it's how they behave on the hard ones. Do they stay calm in chaos? Do they protect their people when blame is being passed around? Do they make decisions based on values, not pressure? Trust is built when people see that their leader doesn't change with the wind, that their word means something, and that their actions follow their principles. Trust is also built in the small things, when leaders listen without interrupting, when they remember people's names, when they check in not just about work, but about life. These moments might seem minor, but they're massive. They communicate, I see you, and that feeling of being seen and valued is what keeps people engaged. It's what turns a workplace into a community. It's important to remember that trust is a two-way street. Leaders often expect their people to trust them, but they forget to extend trust first. Great leaders are generous with trust. They empower their teams to make decisions, to take risks, to lead in their own right. They don't micromanage out of fear, they guide with belief. When people feel trusted, they become more trustworthy. They rise to the level of belief others have in them. Repairing broken trust is one of the hardest things a leader can do, but it's also one of the most meaningful. It requires accountability. It requires apology. It requires change. Words alone won't fix a breach in trust. Consistent, changed behavior will. Leaders must be willing to go first, to take responsibility, and to rebuild from the inside out. In a world full of volatility, change, and uncertainty, trust becomes even more critical. It's the anchor people cling to when everything else feels unsteady. It allows people to focus, to contribute, and to care. Without it, every initiative becomes harder, every conversation becomes guarded, and every goal feels like a burden. Trust is not a luxury for leaders. It is the foundation of everything that matters in leadership. In a world driven by quick wins, quarterly reports, and instant gratification, the idea of building a legacy can seem almost outdated. But the most impactful leaders are not those who chase short-term victories. They are those who think long after they are gone. They understand that true leadership is not about being celebrated in the moment, it's about being remembered for what you created, protected, and passed on. Leadership at its highest form is not about victory, it's about legacy. Legacy is not about having your name on a building or being quoted in company history. It's about how people feel because of the space you created. It's the ripple effect of your influence, the culture that remains, and the values that continue to shape decisions even when you're no longer in the room. Legacy isn't built in grand moments, it's built in the consistent, invisible work of aligning daily actions with timeless principles. Leaders who prioritize legacy are not obsessed with being first, they are committed to being foundational. When leaders focus solely on victory, they tend to prioritize results over relationships. They push for performance at the cost of purpose. They climb the ranks quickly, often leaving chaos in their wake. But victory fades, trophies gather dust, promotions get forgotten. What remains is how you made people feel, what you stood for, and whether the things you built outlived your presence. Legacy is the scoreboard that matters most, and unlike the one in a finite game, it never stops updating. The pursuit of legacy requires patience and vision. It demands that leaders zoom out from the daily grind and ask deeper questions. What kind of world are we shaping? What kind of organization are we leaving behind? Are we teaching people how to win or how to lead? These questions shift the focus from short-term gain to long-term impact. They reframe success as something measured not by market dominance but by meaningful contribution. Legacy-driven leaders mentor more than they manage. They know that their greatest asset isn't their personal performance, it's the leaders they raise behind them. They don't hoard knowledge for the sake of control, they share it to empower. They celebrate others' growth even when it means being surpassed. Their pride comes not from how irreplaceable they are, but from how resilient the team becomes in their absence. That kind of leadership creates ecosystems that thrive independently. It creates trust that spans generations and cultures that don't collapse when one person walks away. Choosing legacy over victory often means making hard decisions. It means saying no to shortcuts that produce quick results but compromise values. It means protecting people over pleasing shareholders. It means staying quiet when it would be easy to grab credit and speaking up when silence is safer. It's the long game of principled leadership where success is measured not in applause but in alignment, not in popularity but in purpose. Legacy is also about the stories we inspire others to tell, not about us but about themselves. The best leaders don't just leave behind achievements, they leave behind belief. They make people believe they can do hard things, believe they are seen, believe their work matters. They create a story in which others become heroes. That story becomes part of the cultural fabric of an organization, woven through traditions, passed down through teams, and lived out in decisions big and small. While chasing victory can create impressive moments, pursuing legacy creates meaningful,